So with that, thank you to everyone for joining us for this project update on the Sacramento Region Parks and Trails Strategic Development Plan. Specifically, we will be covering the latest information from the values supporting regional trails. So the findings from our public survey that was conducted earlier this year, mostly across the month of April. I am Victoria Cacciatore. I'm the project manager for this plan, and I am joined today by Dustin Foster, who will be sharing some of the information about what we learned from these surveys. And then also Jessica Lee from SACOG staff, who is here to make sure that everything goes smoothly and to help us ensure that we have all of your questions addressed as they come in. Not joining us today are the rest of the project team who have done a lot of great work to make sure that we are bringing forth the best information that's going to help us identify a unifying vision for making trail connections, and also to help us identify what is standing in the way of us getting there. So a shout out to Maricela Salazar, Laura Bell, Rosie Ramos, and Darren Conley, who have done a lot of work to support moving this plan forward. And let's see, we have Jessica, who has entered in how you can type a question in through the chat box. So if you check that, you'll see the different ways that you can ask a question. If you have questions during the webinar, or something that needs to be clarified in a timely fashion. Otherwise, we will have a set time for a broader general or a broader question and answer at the end of the webinar. So this is what we will be covering for today. So let's jump into what we've covered thus far with the regional plan and where we're going next. So we know that we have a lot of disconnected trail segments. There's close to 500 miles of trails throughout our region, but many of them are disjointed segments. We know that a connected trail network that would increase access to open space for all of our residents, including those areas that are historically underinvested in and where residents shoulder the negative impact of environmental conditions in the built environment, is going to provide regional benefits. We know that we can use these biking and walking connections to increase not only physical, but also mental health as we create options for safer biking and walking trips. And we know that where trails connect, supportive businesses can open to meet the needs of people who want to bike and walk more, both at providing opportunities for new skills training, such as with bike shops, or also in hospitality services, such as like bike rentals for visitors. We know that when you create a resource and you're turning or you're using the right-of-way for better uses, finding the highest and best uses for these old rail corridors or creek corridors, what have you, that you're creating new opportunities around these connections and something that can help define our region. And it'll become a point of pride for people that are here. We have been building on information from our review of local plans, where we found that across almost 80 local and regional focused plans, and then also looping in some pertinent state plans, that these 6 goals consistently rose to the top. What we've learned around environmental justice and the access analysis that we've done is that lower income families are 30% less likely to have a trail near them in our region. This is very comparable to what you can see on a national and statewide level about lower income communities having less access to parks, open space, green space. And this has also impacts on transportation safety, because without access to these high comfort facilities, and people have to travel in unsafe conditions on the road with high speed traffic or otherwise exposed to greater safety concerns. Around health, we have been able to see, especially with the conditions laid bare with the pandemic, that active living is supportive of other health outcomes, and a lack of supportive infrastructure for active living will thus increase the health disparities that we see on the ground. And then as our region looks for ways that we can successfully emerge from the pandemic, economic vitality is taking many different shapes. Whereas before the pandemic, the way that trails would intersect with economic vitality may have been more focused on how you could create a tourism draw. It's now seen as trails could be one way that we support an equitable economic resurgence and bringing our region out of the pandemic and the negative impacts of it. From working with our partners, we have heard that these are some of the ways that they think our connected trail network is going to be able to make our region a better place, not only to visit, but most especially to live. You know, that even though it's often seen as something that is a nice to have, that recreational connections are key to what make people enjoy living here and have a higher quality of life. We also see that related to the goal of all ages and abilities networks, that trails are welcoming to people of all different abilities. And it's really a turn from our prior design for biking and walking facilities, where you had facilities designed for people who felt comfortable operating a bike as if they were driving a car. And instead making it to where people of all ages, more like an 8 to 80 network, will be able to bike, walk, or scoot in the region. We also know that related to these goals, we do have a number of challenges when we are looking at how we can construct facilities that are going to provide meaningful benefits to residents of disadvantaged communities in the region. That meaningful engagement needs to be there from the very start. From a data analysis side and from gathering research, we can identify the benefits that would be presented to residents if they're able to have higher quality active modes connections and trail connections. But unless the residents are involved in developing the project and also have the ability to say that this is not what we want, they're not going to view it as their own. We also know that there is a challenge when you are looking at multi-jurisdictional connections of coordinating with partners. And while that could be city to city, county to county, or city to county, that also includes the bringing in of our untraditional partners, such as what can we do to smooth out coordinating with railroads, which is a very challenging dilemma, no matter which way you frame it, what can we do to smooth out coordinating with flood control agencies, with reclamation districts, with Caltrans, a whole host of partners that all need to be in a room for some of our more challenging projects to move forward. And then also noting that while we are blessed as a region with many different rivers and waterways and these beautiful geographic features, they also serve to divide us quite physically in the case of rivers where you need a bridge to overcome it, but we also have the issue of being divided by state highways, being divided by railroads. And these are things that are very difficult to overcome if you're a person walking or biking or scooting. And it'll take a lot of coordination to overcome those. So with that, I want to pivot to the next part of this. So no longer recapping where we've been and what we've already shared, and now moving into what is new information for this group. So with our survey, we knew that a regional plan is going to bring a lot of opportunities and a lot of challenges. Within these challenges and opportunities, we knew that we needed quality public engagement to understand the needs of a wide-ranging 6-county region. And also from working with our partners, when we were talking about how those 6 goals aligned with local efforts towards placemaking, towards transportation connections, we knew that the existence of a trail isn't enough, and the value of a trail is based on what access it provides to residents. And with that in mind, we looked to structure a survey that was going to find out more about the values of a trail as opposed to just the binary question, do you have a trail near you, yes or no? So we had a public survey that we made public March 15th through April 30th originally. We ended up extending the survey out a little bit into May for reasons I'll get into in a moment. We had originally planned when we scoped this project in 2018, 2019, to do a lot of on the ground events to meet community members where they were. And then a pandemic settled upon the world, and it was no longer advisable to be at in-person events to encourage large gatherings of people, to encourage community events. So we adapted our approach to focus more on a web-based tool with different ways that we could look to reach people that may have a greater digital divide or otherwise be less comfortable with web-based surveys. So we looked at our partners to help us get the information out about this survey that was looking to uncover the values of what people found important in their trail connections instead of the more conventional approach, which is to ask people to jump straight into saying exactly what they need and placing a pin on a map. We also look to our cities, our counties, and our parks districts to serve as the messengers for this, to share the word about the survey, to invite the people that they serve to fill out the survey, so then SACOG could collect this information at a regional level and learn more about the values behind trails. We also leaned on the transit operators in our region. And being that SACOG does do a lot of work on regional long-range planning, we also looked at SACOG contacts such as our May is Bike Month database and our commuter club database. Within those, you had about 32,000 people that were reached out to about this survey. We also did the coordinating work with Sacramento Bee to run a story in their backseat driver column, which is their transportation series of articles. And our key purpose of this outreach was to understand the areas that people want to go and how these destinations relate to the goals and our outcomes of the Connected Trail Network. So we did ask for specific examples of places that people wanted to go to and why, because by asking for more information behind why people wanted to go to those places, we could then bridge that gap between quantitative and qualitative reasons for people getting to different places. Also, like to share some of the other places that we worked with. We asked as a partner, Pro Youth, who is our partner on the Youth Leadership Academy, to share information with their list, which was over 1,000 contacts who are working in youth development. And within, actually, we have a graph showing how our survey responses were gathered over the time of the survey period being live. So this first spike that you see is where we shared the information about the survey with the SACOG databases about the SACOG databases for Emmaus Bike Month and Commuter Club. The blue line is people that filled out survey partially. Sorry about that. And the orange line is for people that completed the survey. And then the second surge that you see, that is the date that the Sacramento Bee article ran on April 28th. And while we had slightly fewer people that started the survey from the Sacramento Bee article, we also had a higher number of people complete the surveys that they started following the run of that article. Throughout here, around April 10th through April 26th, that is when we are doing weekly checks on the survey response rates and doing targeted outreach to people and to geographies based on where we saw we had less response from people, and also taking extra steps to ensure that we reached enough people in the communities that we wanted to reach. We know that, especially with online tools, reaching residents in disadvantaged communities is very challenging. We knew that we would need to work harder and smarter to reach these residents, especially given that they're often lacking in green space and access to the quality infrastructure that is going to promote walking and biking. And we also had the fact that we're still in a pandemic. Vaccines were just starting to roll out when we conducted these surveys. And when we were rescoping our efforts on public outreach, it was unsure when the vaccines would even be available. So we did a lot of outreach to community-based organizations to find out from them how we might be able to best reach the communities that they serve, and also provide materials for them to distribute to the people that they worked with. We reached out to about 60 community-based organizations across all 6 counties in the SACOG region and asked them how to best reach these communities, and then also requested their help in publicizing the survey. We also conducted about 10 in-depth interviews with some of these organizations to learn more about the challenges that the communities they serve face, being that they worked with residents on a day-to-day basis and were able to relay some of that information that we could then fold into our understanding of the needs for park or for trail connections to needed destinations and also to parks. Across the board in both our in-depth interviews with community-based organizations and the less in-depth contacts with them about asking for their help to spread information about the survey, all of them mentioned the need for participation incentives. This is a grant-funded project, so participation incentives are not allowed within the grant. So we identified non-grant funding to purchase gift cards to both Safeway and Walmart, which are located in all 6 counties. Safeway is not present in Yuba and Sutter counties, so we added in Walmart to ensure that there was a motivation for residents in Yuba and Sutter counties as well. Right, and not seeing any questions on that, so I will now jump into who we heard from as part of the public survey. So we received over 6,000 partial responses, and then over 3,000 people that made it all the way through the survey and clicked submit, which is a very impressive turnout for an online-based survey. It is covering a wide geography, but this is a distribution of where people noted their starting points for where they are starting their trips, aka where they live. And this is the most in-depth that we will make this information available out of respect for privacy. So population-wise, the representation from each county is more or less in line with what you would expect. The greatest share of the population in our 6-county region lives in Sacramento County, and they also made up the greatest percentage of respondents. There was a switch between El Dorado and Yolo counties, where Yolo County has a higher population number than El Dorado County does. More people live in Yolo County, but Yolo County had a slightly lower turnout. We had the number one city that people located themselves within. So when they're placing a pin on the map was the city of Sacramento with 1,683 people who responded to the survey saying that they lived there. And number 2 was city of Roseville in Placer County. From there, we had strong response rate from Davis, from city of Folsom, and from Elk Grove, and also West Sacramento. So a lot of people across those cities. People who filled out the survey were asked to identify what race or ethnicity they most strongly identified with. And since this is a blending of questions from the census, where if you're answering the census question, there's one question that asks you what race are you, and another question of what ethnicity are you? It's difficult to draw exact comparisons, specifically around whether a person identified as Hispanic or Latino, Latina, or Latinx. So we can't make the direct comparisons between the populations in our region, but we do know that for some of the categories with a little bit less of that overlap, we know that we had an undersampling of Black people who responded. We were pretty close on representation from Pacific Islander and from Asian respondents in our region, and that we had an oversampling of American Indian or Alaska Natives. And part of that was due to the outreach that we did with community-based organizations and the help that we received from Native American health organizations. When we're looking at income levels, that is a little bit easier to draw the comparisons across all these different categories, because it's easier to make them align with census categories. We know that we had roughly double the amount of both people who earn $150,000 or more in their household, and also about double for the households that earn between $100,000 $150,000. So we have an oversampling of those higher incomes, about even with the amount of people that earn between 50 and 100,000 in their household for the region. And we did not have an equal representation from people who are earning less than 50,000. We had about 11% of our survey respondents that answered this question who earn under 50K in their household a year. And that's about, or it's between a quarter and 1/3 of the actual regional population that would fit into that category. And for these points, a slight overrepresentation of males, but generally pretty close, and also a slightly higher representation of younger populations, not relative to the population in the region, but more related to who you're normally able to get to respond to a public survey. And this is one of the interesting things that we're able to look at from the survey response data. And mind you, this is based just on survey respondents. So it is not representative of all trail access within a region. That's a different set of analysis. But for people that responded to this survey, you can see that trail access very much differs based on where you're located. It's a bit lopsided throughout the region. So anecdotally, we had a lot of respondents from Yuba and Sutter County noting that there's only one trail up here, and referring to the Sutter Bike Path, which you could look to as an indication that there are opportunities to promote the other existing trails, such as the Marysville Ring Levee. And then it's also interesting to look at the reported the trail distance within Yolo County, where this could be partially explained by how there are few trails in Woodland, and residents in Woodland would have their nearest trail in Davis, which is several miles away. So it's just an interesting snapshot about how much your proximity to trails can vary based on where you are living and the number of trails that are in your county already. So at this point, I would like to hand it to Dustin to talk more about what we saw as far as people sharing information about favorite trails.
Thank you, Victoria. And here, let's switch the screen share so I can share screen. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Hopefully y'all can see the slide, favorite trails. So one of the questions we asked in our public survey that we spent a lot of time really focusing on was, what is your favorite trail and why? So to get some chat pod excitement going, I'm gonna ask you all that question. All of you in the attendees here at our webinar this morning, please type in the chat your favorite trail. And no need to share why. We can parse through that later. So let's see. Not seeing any chat response. Oh, let's see. Who Trail Nevada City? Hey, Garrett. Never heard of that one, but I look forward to riding it in the future. Russ Kelly, American River. Yes, yes, yes. You know, by and large, the number one favorite trail that folks you know, placed a dot in our survey was the American Trail. So we won't even really note it too much in our next slide. Discovery Park Trail, right? That's what Jedediah Smith, a part of that American River Trail system. Hidden Falls, Sutter Bike Path, LOL. Good one, Josh. That seemingly a good trail up in Sutter County. Jackrabbit Trail, haven't ridden that one. So Melissa, looking forward to figuring that one out. And El Dorado Trail from Ginny. All right, that's great. Thanks everyone for sharing. You know, like I said, American River Trail was by and large the number one. Here's some other ones. You know, once again, this is all about values, right? So, you know, folks, you know, and kind of along the lines with what Victoria was saying about the response rates, right? A lot of folks in Sacramento, American River Trail was high on the list. A lot of folks in Elk Grove really loving the Laguna Creek Trail. Folks in El Dorado, Placerville, you know, really stating their love for the El Dorado Trail. And then up in Roseville, right? We got a lot of response in Roseville, Dry Creek, Minor Ravine / False Ravine Trail system. That whole system in Roseville got a lot of favorite trail support. But we got Sutter Bike Trail up in Sutter County between Yuba City and the town of Sutter. And then obviously the Davis Bike Loop in Davis, a lot of support from that. A couple other ones that aren't in this list: Clarksburg Branch Line in West Sacramento, Johnny Cash Trail in Folsom. And I will say actually the Levee Trail up in Yuba City, that also got a lot of love. So just to kind of give you a little more sense of the data, here is the heat map of those 3,000 points, right? What's your favorite trail? Now, about 2,500 of those people, of those dots, excuse me, included information as to why this specific trail was their favorite trail. And that was very interesting. Yes, we read through all 2,500 open-ended responses. A lot of work, a lot of data combing, a lot of coding little things in spreadsheets. Anyways, what we found is that why, you know, there's some really key top insights across the region as to why that trail is their favorite trail. Half of the respondents stated, this is my favorite trail because it connects to nature. Whether it was a river, American River Bike Trail, right? ARP, thanks Walt. American River Parkway. Yeah, a lot of folks talking about that specifically, hey, connecting to that. But in general, right, rivers, levee paths, right, seeing the mountains, seeing the Sutter Buttes, a lot of mountain biking trails, right, as you can see out here in, you know, parts of El Dorado, parts of, let's see, Placer, parts of Yuba up here. Anyways, a lot of folks talk about nature, wildlife, trees, good stuff. About 20% of the respondents said this was my favorite trail because it was proximate to me. It was close by. It was the closest in my neighborhood. Interestingly, I think proximity is also a function of kind of where you are in the region. A lot of folks liked up in Yuba Sutter, for instance, talked about, hey, this is like the closest one to me. But from 2 slides ago, let's see, I think I can go back to that. Right, Yuba and Sutter had a much larger distance to any trail. But obviously in Sacramento County, a lot of folks stated, hey, this trail is the closest one to me, within a couple miles, and that. Clearly proximity, varies depending on where you are. Another big statement that we heard a lot in this survey: no cars, and that might be paired with a caps lock and an exclamation point. And hey, I agree with them. Right? Sometimes it's not fun to bike around or walk around with cars zooming by. So folks, they like a car-free environment. They talked about they like trails because they're safe. They don't have to cross large roads to get to where they want to go. A lot of folks expressed actually concern that, hey, I can't bike to my favorite trail. I have to drive and park there and then, utilize my bike or walk at that trail. So that's a big concern, right? Folks to be able to get to get to their favorite trail. So yeah, Sacramento County and Yolo County said a lot about safety and that. A few other insights: about 10% of respondents said this was their favorite trail because it provided them regional access, especially, as you may imagine, on the American River Bike Trail between Folsom and downtown Sacramento. That was a key, kind of regional travel that folks talked about. In Placer and El Dorado County, you saw a higher response rate talking about recreational activities like mountain biking, walking their dogs, so on and so forth. One other thing we really loved reading this why was the sentimentality, right? Folks talking about, hey, this trail connects me to my family. This trail reminded me of being a kid again, right? I've been riding this trail for 40 years. And a lot of folks talked about these trails as being a jewel, a gem, right? Once again, American River Bike Trail. Or one of our favorite things, someone said the American River Trail was a true 916 classic. How many things can we say in this region is a true, in at least Sacramento County, is a true 916 classic? American River Trail is that classical thing. Anyways, moving on. A little more, what's your favorite trail? I'll start with the practical connections. About 9% of respondents. All right, good. Getting some love. And anyone in the chat want to say anything sentimental about their favorite trail? Anyone want to say why? Feel free. That'll be fun too. Anyways, practical connections, right? People still talked about using this trail system to get to the store, to get to school, to get to work, to get to downtown or midtown, right? Our trail system does provide these practical connections. It's not just about connecting to nature. It's not just about, regional travel or recreation. It's about practical things. Any good memories? And then, this next thing we'll analyze is kind of something we were getting to earlier, right? Crossing boundaries. How far do you have to go to get to your favorite trail? And so how we looked at this is actually comparing the home location of each respondent with the specific location of their favorite trail. Oh, okay, Victoria. Oh yeah, we all love the smell of near the Blue Diamond, the almond factory near Midtown, right? Yeah, that's always fun. Anyways, so now we're going to get into crossing boundaries, right? 38% of response, their favorite trail is outside the city they live in. 62% were in the same city, right? So once again, proximity, there's something important there for being able to access our trail system. So now we'll just kind of go through each of the specific jurisdictions, note some maybe higher responses around 100, right? So Elk Grove, it's around 50-50. Folsom, right? About 70-30, very extensive trail system. In Folsom and a burgeoning, growing system in Elk Grove, you see a good amount of folks, within their city, the trail, provides a lot of access. Rancho Cordova, another Sacramento County location. A lot of the Sac County locations, they have the lowest average distance to any trail, but they also have a high response rate in terms of, the respondents having that favorite trail within their jurisdiction. Kind of an overlap there. Not a correlation, but let's see. Oh, Ginny, that's beautiful. I can actually empathize and relate to that, right? That having this trail, nearby, to be able to see friends, to see acquaintances, it's very helpful for our mental health this past year and a half. So thanks for that. Going back deeper into the data, Roseville, once again, high response in terms of favorite trails within their jurisdiction, as well as Sacramento and West Sacramento. But you see, in a lot of the smaller jurisdictions, maybe I'll go back and note some of, just to note that, right? A lot of the smaller jurisdictions, have a higher percentage of folks that are outside. Interestingly, Davis actually has a 71% outside of home jurisdiction versus 29% inside. But, the bike loop is kind of one of those parts of the region that folks did note. So, some interesting things here in the data. And then finally, I'll go into the counties. So these were the dots where your home jurisdiction wasn't in any incorporated city, obviously. El Dorado County, still a lot of, this might be an interesting one because counties are large, but right, El Dorado County favorite trails, 62%. Sacramento County, right, 64%. Anyway, so there you go. So that's that. Let's see, one last comment we have from Jessica. Love seeing the raft, the rafter of wild turkeys on the American River. Yeah, yep. And the goats when they're clearing out the brush. That's very fun. Yeah, that's great. So with that, maybe the next section is covered by Victoria, but maybe I'll pause. Are there any questions I don't see any questions in the chat, just a lot of beautiful comments. But are there any Q&A, any questions?
Dustin, we don't have any questions in the Q&A.
Great. All right. Well, thanks for your patience, everyone. Learn about insights into values, why we love our favorite trail. All right, back to you, Victoria.
So contrary to popular belief, it's not all olfactory. It's not just the different smells on the trail, specifically the sage on the American River Parkway that I'm always a really big fan of. I guess you guys now know what's motivating me. It's just all scent based. So allow me a moment to find where my screen share went. Okay, I should be able to. Huh. Or not.
How about, I can share for you. Does that work?
That'd be great. Yeah, something is off with my computer. Right, so with the places I want to go, we had a lot of responses on this question because it was something that people could answer more than once. And some people really went to town with saying all the different places they would want to bike or walk or scoot to. Could you go to the next slide, please? So we started with a primer question to get people thinking about, in general, where do you think that you would want to walk, bike, or roll to? And there were a lot of different places that people noted they wanted to bike places for exercise. They wanted to bike places for fun. Uh, Slightly less popular, but still high up there for work and errands. Much lower turnout for people saying that either they or what they would want for their kids if it was a parent responding, since we did have a slightly lower, or we had a much lower number of people under the age of 18. Lower number of people saying bike, walk, or roll to school. And I think that this is kind of reflecting more or less our general understanding of where people would want to go to on trails. And next slide, please. So we had close to 12,000 pins dropped on the map of people saying, I want to go this place by biking or by walking, by scooting. People were able to select what type of mode they would use to get to that different place. So a lot of different areas. As far as a heat map, there's just a lot of destinations anywhere that there are people, but there are also a good number of places that you could connect to where you can see little blurbs for the Sutter Buttes. You can see some of the places along destinations in Yolo County, along Cache Creek, but also to a lot of these places where you kind of anticipate people wanting to gather. So different community centers. Thank you. So for each of those pin drops, each of those little blobs on the map, people could choose the different reasons why they would want to go there. And they had the ability to say that you are going to do more than one. You had more than one reason for wanting to go to a place, which very few of us go to anywhere for just one sole reason. And that's the only thing. We do a lot of trip chaining, we connect purposes, we do multiple things at the same time. So we had a lot of people saying, we want to go here for fun, we want to go here for exercise. You see a precipitous drop off of people saying, I want to go here because it's my workplace. I think that is a reflection of the changing work dynamic that we have. More people are teleworking. There's uncertainty around when people would be going back into the office, or just even if that's a priority, there are a lot of logistical constraints with biking, walking, scooting, otherwise rolling to work. You have to be there at a specific time. Are there or aren't there showers when you get there? Do you have a place to change if you got kind of grubby? Say maybe you only like to bike in shorts and you're not going to be able to wear shorts at work. I don't know. A lot of different reasons, but people are less likely to say that I want to bike here because I want to get there for work. And they're even less likely to say, I either personally or I want my kids to be able to bike, walk, or roll to this place for school or for training. There are still a lot of challenges for people to feel comfortable with their kids going to school, either the distance, or we heard a lot of people voicing their concerns about the speeds of people traveling in that area, and they wouldn't want their kids biking, walking on the area for that reason, or the distance to the school. A lot of constraints. Next slide. So you saw that there are a lot of people that said, I want to go here because exercise. That sounds like a great reason. And before we get into the mindset of saying, oh gosh, well, this is just going to be for exercise purposes, that's not very interesting if we're looking at trails as a way to decrease the number of people that have to go places in their vehicles, or if you're looking at biking and walking investments as a way to decrease greenhouse gas emissions. So exercise is very often grouped with these other purposes. So it's not that I'm going out just to do a 10-mile bike ride and get my heart rate up that way. It's I'm going out to go to the grocery store, and I will be exercising while I'm doing that because I'm walking there, or I am going to go shopping. Like I need to go get a card for my niece who's graduating, and I'm gonna bike there. I'll get some exercise while I'm doing it because I'm biking there, and maybe the parking isn't that great there. So anyhow, there are a lot of these different sort of twofers. You exercise and you do the thing that you needed or wanted to do regardless. Next slide. And when you saw that high percentage of people that said that I am doing this for fun, there is actually an intersection between these trips that would have been made otherwise by car, and how increasing our trail connections are high comfort, high safety, active modes connections, how that is going to intersect with people having fun. We had a lot of mentions of people wanting to go to their downtowns, and you might also consider how frequently downtowns are facing a problem around having sufficient parking for all of the people that want to be there, given that a lot of downtowns had their bones date back to a pre-car time in our region. So wanting to get to dining and entertainment in their downtowns, or perhaps there are areas where they can accomplish many different things that they want to go to at once. So, going to the grocery store, having a restaurant to go to, and then also every so often they have events there. And then also the places where people were able to socialize with friends in what we are now viewing as the best outcome. We as Californians are finally embracing the fact that we have pretty great weather most time of the year. So let's spend it outside if we're going to have some social time with our friends. This was at parks, such as the Elk Grove Park was mentioned, where people would go for fireworks. But also places where you could go and either get a drink or a coffee with friends. So these different places that, as everybody was forced into isolation as part of the pandemic, we recognized the value of having places that enable us to build community, to reduce our isolation, to see our friends in an area that looks more like your community. So the places that represent your community. And I think next slide, please. And as we're mentioning, what we saw with a lot of the comments and the surveys, the underlying value is that people wanted a place where they could be comfortable when they are out there biking or walking or rolling. They felt threatened by people driving cars, driving trucks, some instances of people mentioning freight vehicles going through too fast, or just, by nature of being a freight truck, it's very intimidating to share a right of way with the freight vehicle. So looking at the ways that they could have more separation from there. And the last slide. So with all of the demographic information that we collected, we wanted to analyze whether there was a significant difference in the places that people wanted to go to and why. So was there a difference across different races, ethnicities, across different income levels, across any of those self-identified characteristics of people? And this was the only place where we really saw a notable difference around the types of destinations that people wanted to get to and their feelings about them. Was, can you get to this place easily and safely now? And from the information that we were able to gather, there was a noticeable variation on the types of barriers that people face. Specifically, lower income, people of color, and younger residents were all more likely to say, I have to travel out of my way to get to this place comfortably and easily. So while this is a self-selecting survey, it's a limited survey, it does provide an interesting insight that maybe we can explore more with future more localized planning efforts as we look at the different barriers to trail use and how biking and walking comfort levels impact people's decisions to bike or walk or scoot in a different area. And I believe that is the wrap up of the survey information. So I wanted to create this space for people to ask questions if you have any. Jessica, would you be able to do to unmute if anybody has a hand raised, please?
Yes, absolutely. It looks like Garrett has a question. Garrett, I'm going to allow you to talk. You are unmuted.
Hi, everyone, and thank you, Victoria, Dustin, for the presentation today. I'm wondering, in the survey and in general planning, has any thought gone into making any of these trails dirt trails?
With our next steps of being identifying what the trail connections are, it's something that's being sort of left open based on input from the community and then also the surrounding areas. What we've heard from a lot of partners in more rural areas, especially the mountain areas, like what Dustin was mentioning around if you want to go mountain biking in a place, it might be where some of the trails could be more on that, but they're definitely going to be the ones where it's like in the balance of how much this is providing a recreational asset and whether it's also providing a transportation connection. They're going to be much lower on the transportation potential. So I think that we're going to be identifying that in the next stage of working with cities and counties, but it's on the table. I see we also, oh, sorry, Garrett.
Yeah, no, thank you. Yeah, I mean, just coming from a mountain biking background, my favorite trail, Hoot Trail up in Nevada City, is mountain bike based. And what I've seen here in Fair Oaks is you're going to see a lot more people wanting to use the trails if they're fun, and so the combining recreation and transportation will hopefully be something that can be considered moving forward. Also for safety too, because on the paved bike trails, people go so fast. My younger kids almost got run over a handful of times on the American River bike trail that's paved. So slowing them down on a dirt trail is a safety issue as well. So thank you.
Yeah, I think that brings up a really good point about the specifics of the trail design, about how there are different areas where if a trail is providing more of access to communities with, and we'll have an intended user base of people who are maybe younger or maybe older and they don't feel comfortable sharing the trail. I think that there are different design characteristics you can put into a trail to make it less likely that people are able to speed just based on like surface textures or other design characteristics. And then there are also some areas where kind of what one of the attendees today mentioned as a comment, having dirt trails next to paved trails. So there's a space for people to walk without, worrying about, somebody coming up really quickly behind them on a bike. Jim Hagen Smith. So thank you for that. And then it was seconded by a couple folks. Okay, we had another question. How do you plan to stitch this information together into a unifying interconnected regional trail system? From Brian. And we are reaching out to our cities and our counties to share the information from the surveys, from what we gathered from our local plan review, and all the conversations that we've had up to date. We're working on that for the next couple of months to identify which trails fit into a regional trail network. So they're speaking to those 6 goals that we highlighted at the beginning of the webinar, and then also some different performance metrics that were reviewed by SACOG board committees back in June. I will add those, the performance metrics to the webinar page after this webinar, and we'll share it with all attendees. So you'll have an idea of what we're working towards and what we're trying to measure with a regional plan. But it's basically SACOG working with local agencies to identify both the existing, the planned, and then also the areas where we know that there's a need for a trail based on all the data that has been provided, and what are our options to make those connections if there aren't already some planned trails in that area. Okay, so you have Brian's question.
Victoria, it appears that Garrett may have a second question.
Okay.
I'm gonna allow, oh, he just lowered his hand. Maybe it was left over from the previous question.
It could be. We also have the comment from Jenny that the El Dorado Trail is attempting to have off-road options for the majority of the trail. Kids and adults like to be able to choose between dirt or paved trail, given what they want to do at a time. And yeah, if there are any other questions, please raise your hand or enter them into the chat box, whatever you prefer. Well, I know that, oh, okay. Some questions about Rockland connectivity that will be taken offline. Thank you, Justin. When will the results be shared with local folks? A question to Jenny. Do you mean local as in the city or county, that type of local? So SACOG as the regional government, or do you mean local folks as in groups or resident level? So I'm not sure if Jenny is typing out more local governments. So we've shared the raw survey data with cities and counties earlier this summer, in May actually. And I can follow up with you about any questions about getting information for your area. We haven't been sharing the complete survey database with anyone because there's a lot of information in that. And so we've been focusing on sharing information from the survey respondents in each area. So you could use it for then say like different planning in El Dorado County, if you're El Dorado County, or within Placerville. So I hope that is all right. Got a thumbs up. Dustin, can you do the next slide, please?
Sure, but one last comment. Melissa, getting to places is fun, connectivity is good, and I would have to agree.
Agreed.
Oh, there's another question.
Connectivity, yeah, connectivity in a larger statewide perspective, Delta Trail, etc. So we have a representative from DPC on our internal group and are coordinating with them to the best of our ability right now. They have been a really great partner in sharing information and how we can also elevate each other's work. So we are working on that to the south and west. We do have some overlapping area with the Delta Trail too. We have not been able to gain quite the same level of traction with any efforts that could be going on to the north of us. So we'll continue to look into that. And if you have any recommendations, please send them to me. So the next steps. Yes, El Dorado Trail. Yeah, with the Great Delta Trail connecting through different Bay Area counties and then up through West Sacramento and Sacramento. Do you see that there's a lot of work going into there based on how we'll be able to cross those regions? We have been working mostly with Delta Protection Commission on it, and can see if there is anything that MTC, so the Bay Area equivalent of SACOG, would want us to keep an eye towards as we're working, since the Bay Area is also working on their own trail network connections across many counties. Right, so this is the process map for the Parks and Trails Strategic Development Plan. You can see we had a bit of a stall out in March and April of 2020, but we've been doing our best to catch up ever since then and revising our engagement strategy, able to only suffer some minor project delays. So next slide. What's very interesting is where we're heading to next. So we have sharing this information with you, but right now at the staff level, we are working on identifying that trail network that's going to connect across all 6 counties, working with our local partners, cities and counties and other invested stakeholders to identify what planned, what existing and what potential trail segments are needed to achieve the values around community, around economic vitality, around equitable trail access and proactively addressing the social determinants of health that we see in our region. So we are working towards that and aiming for a draft network alignment in October and presenting that for adoption or approval by the SACOG board in November. And then from that point, we will then be moving on to the prioritization of trail segments in the plan to see what are going to be the needed segments that are going to kickstart the development of the connected trail network, what we can do to move it from vision to reality. And while this notes the plan wrapping up in June of 2022, in some ways you can view that as just really accomplishing the first 5% of this effort, because after you come up with a plan, then you have to implement it. So looking forward to making it through this first 5% with you all. So with that, I think we should probably wrap up. We will post a recording of this webinar on the website within the week. I will add that document that I mentioned. It's also part of the SACOG Transportation Committee agenda and the SACOG Land Use and Natural Resources Committee agenda item for tomorrow. So it's available on our agendas page, but I'll put it on the website or the Parks and Trails website too for easy reference. Thank you, everyone.